D&D book number 2. D&D book number 2. Suffer the children in Jesus' name. Chapter 7. Caroline had been sleeping soundly when she was abruptly awakened in the early light of dawn. "What's happening?" she asked as Toby lifted her from the bed. Her arms reached out around his neck in startled reflex. "Remember you said you wished I would come steal you and put you on my horse and ride away?" She relaxed, snuggling against his chest. "Yes, I remember." "Well, wishes do come true, Caroline." She gasped as realization dawned. "But wait!" She tried to wriggle out of his arms. "I'm not dressed." He grinned. She wore only what he thought was adorably cute pajamas, light blue shorts, and a matching top with pink ballet shoes printed on them. "Oh, no, you didn't say anything in the wish about getting dressed." Arriving at the front door, he juggled her around in order to throw it open. "Toby, being dressed is usually understood. Now let me down." "Sorry, when being abducted, one must go with what one is or is not wearing." "But what if someone sees me?" "First of all, you are completely covered, and second of all, Les won't come anywhere near where I'm taking you, and he knows where I'm taking you, so don't worry. He wouldn't dream of interrupting us." He carried her around the porch to the side of the house, and there stood the largest, blackest horse Caroline had ever seen. Not that she'd seen many. "Wow, is that Molly's baby?" He laughed at the way the question was worded. "No, this is not Molly's baby. This, Caroline, is Thunder. Thunder, say hello to Caroline. And be nice." Caroline giggled as the giant horse actually responded. He whinnied softly and nudged Caroline's shoulder. She tentatively reached out to stroke his nose. "Oh my, but you are a beautiful creature," she uttered softly. "Well, now you've gone and done it. He'll get a big head for sure and never do anything I tell him." Toby tossed Caroline up and onto the horse, and she gasped, terrified. But he swung up into the saddle behind her quickly and pulled her snug against him. One hand moved down to stroke Thunder while the other splayed across her abdomen. "Okay, now, hold on. You're okay." She giggled. "Are you talking to me or the horse?" "You," he chuckled. He snapped the reins. Caroline gasped and held on for dear life. "It's okay, darling. You can relax. I promise I won't let you fall." After the initial shock, she did relax, leaning back against Toby's solid frame and letting the euphoria overtake her. It was wonderful, the cool air hitting her face, Toby's arms around her, his hands spread protectively across her midsection, holding her steady. He leaned forward. "Listen," he said in her ear. "I can't hear anything over the sound of hooves pounding the ground." "Exactly. Sounds like thunder, huh?" "Oh, thunder. Aptly named." "Mm-hmm. And that would be Molly's doing, since she didn't get to name any real people." "Well, she did a great job on this one." Toby coaxed Thunder into a canter and then a gallop, and Caroline laughed out loud with the excitement and pleasure. They sped across the meadow, down a wooded path, and splashed across the stream, each twist and turn causing Caroline to squeal in delight. And just when Caroline thought her backside couldn't possibly take any more, they came to a halt in a secluded spot near the stream. The grass was soft and the morning sun warm. Flowers bloomed along the edge of the water, birds sang, squirrels scurried. It was beautiful. Paradise, really. Toby helped her down and laid a blanket out on the grass. He grabbed a saddlebag off Thunder and swatted the horse's backside. Thunder walked slowly away, nibbling on the tender shoots of grass. Caroline sat down on the blanket as Toby pulled breakfast out of the saddlebag like a magician, a bowl of strawberries, muffins, and a thermos of coffee. "You are amazing and so sweet," she sighed as she sank her teeth into a huge red strawberry. He watched her reverently. "So are you," he said as he leaned over to taste her lips. "What other surprises do you have in here?" Caroline asked, pulling the saddlebag over and rummaging through its contents. She pulled out two large towels. "Towels? Why towels?" she inquired. "To dry off after we go swimming." "Swimming? This is one of my all-time favorite places, and I used to come here and lie in the sun and swim and work things out in my mind. There's peace here. I thought you would like it." She stretched out. "I could stay right here forever." He took a final gulp of coffee, swung his legs in front of him, and began unlacing his work boots. He stood and pulled his shirt over his head, stripped off his jeans, exposing a bathing suit, and waded out into the cold water. Caroline watched him. He was definitely a specimen. His broad back rippled with muscle, his steel-like legs were long and covered with springy black hair. He had a tan, telling Caroline he spent a lot of time outside. He moved out a few more steps and disappeared as he dove under the water. She rose to get a better view. At first, she hadn't noticed a place that was deep enough to swim, but now she could see where the water moved off into a deeper side pool, unaffected by the current. Toby motioned to her. Come on in. She shook her head. Unlike you, I don't have a bathing suit under my pajamas. Well, you can go skinny dipping. I won't look, he said with a grin. Yeah, right. I won't be skinny dipping today. Toby shrugged. It was worth a try. Just wear your PJs. It won't hurt them. She pouted as she considered it. Is it cold? What do you think? It looks freezing. He waved her in. I promise to keep you warm. She looked around her, making sure no one watched them. Slowly she rose and walked to the bank. Toby watched intently. She was so completely adorable. Every inch of his body yearned to hold her. Caroline concentrated on stepping over the stones in the shallow part of the stream, and she looked up shivering. Lord, it's freezing! Toby shook his head. It's a lot warmer here in the deeper water. Come on. When she came to where the water deepened, she looked up smiling. Here goes. She dove in and came up gasping. You lied, she squealed. Toby only laughed. I'm going to get hypothermia. Swim around, you'll warm up. Immediately she went under and swam to Toby, resurfacing right in front of him. He grabbed her around the waist and pulled her to him, and she wrapped her legs around him. You can swim. Good. I was worried about that. She laughed. Well, once I'm already in the water is not the best time to be asking whether I can swim. He shrugged. Well, better late than never. Where did you learn to swim? I grew up in apartments and motels. All I did was swim. From the time the pool opened in May to whenever they closed it, it was my only form of recreation. She leaned back into the water, sighing. But I never swam in a creek, nor in my pajamas. It actually feels kind of wonderful. So free, so liberating. She floated on her back, keeping her legs wrapped around him. She closed her eyes and experienced the moment. Happy. She actually felt happy. She moved her arms slightly with the current to stay afloat, and Toby watched her, completely entranced. Her hair floated around her face like a water lily. Her cheeks glowed. Her chest moved with her breath, the water sloshing over her. She sighed, holding the second sound for several seconds. You're doing a very good job. A good job? He asked. Yes, you said you would keep me warm. Well, I am warm. He pulled her up for a kiss, and she laughed and splashed him and swam away. He was right behind. They played tag until her lips began to turn blue and her teeth chattered, and Toby helped her over the stones in the shallow water and rushed to retrieve their towels. He wrapped one around his waist and brought the other to her where she stood at the water's edge. He draped the towel around her shoulders, warming her instantly. Lifting her, he carried her the rest of the way so that she wouldn't get her feet muddy and laid her down on the blanket. Taking her towel from around her, he began to dry her. He began with her hair and face, stopping to kiss her nose and cheeks and finally her waiting mouth. He rose up, kneeling over her, drying her arms and hands, kissing each finger. Toby skipped down to her feet, massaging and drying between each toe, and she giggled. Ticklish? Very, she answered. He finished drying her and politely wrapped the towel back around her. Sitting down next to her, he tilted her face up and kissed her with all the love he felt. Caroline purred and laid back on the blanket. Toby laid next to her, turned toward her, his lips skimming her face and then moving back to her mouth. They kissed and snuggled a long time, and Toby knew it was time to stop, or he'd find himself granting her original request and make love to her right here in the woods. He leaned in for one last kiss, but a slight noise had him raising his head sharply, his eyes quickly scanning the area. What is it? Caroline asked. I thought I heard something. He smiled. It was probably thunder. Toby promptly forgot the interruption and laid his head next to Caroline's. He pondered how he had come to love her as much as he did. Silently, she stroked his hair. Her touch was gentle and sweet, just like her. Tell me something about your childhood, Caroline. I don't want to talk about bad stuff right now. You said once it wasn't all bad. Tell me something good. You must have one good memory. She thought silently for several moments while Toby waited patiently. She sighed. I don't remember where we lived, but it was when my father was still with us, and we lived in a house, not apartments. Anyway, there was this forsythia bush by the porch. Southerners call them yellow bells. I used to break off a branch and strip all the flowers except the one at the tip, and the branch became my magic wand, and I would run around the yard pretending I was a fairy and granting wishes. Toby smiled at the picture of innocence she must have been, actually still was. What kind of wishes did you grant? She shrugged. The usual stuff. A pretty red bike for Susie, a brand new dress for Bonnie, a baby brother for Anna, a new doll, a bag of candy. And who were they? Neighborhood kids? Oh no, just friends. Imaginary friends, I guess. He sighed. Even her good memories were sad to him. The sweet longings of a lonely little girl that never came to pass. He wanted so much to change all that. He made a silent vow that he would make them happen, all her dreams. He sat up and reached for his jeans. There was so much he wanted to do for her. Maybe we can come here again before I leave, Caroline suggested wistfully as she helped fold the blanket and towels. He smiled. Most assuredly, Princess. Your wish is my command. He gave a short whistle. Thunder, he called. Within just a few moments the giant horse appeared. They loaded him up and mounted. Toby guided him slowly down the path, through the woods. Toby's hand on Caroline's waist made her quiver. She had experienced so many wonderful things today. Swimming in only her loose-fitting PJs felt positively brazen. Even now the horse ride felt different, more intimate. She grinned as she made the decision to test her newfound brazenness. Lifting up slightly, she grabbed the hem of her wet pajama shirt and whisked it over her head, letting it fly into the wind. Toby's body quickened. What are you doing, you little hussy, you? Toby whispered in her ear. I found out how it feels to swim almost naked. It felt so wonderful, so liberating. I've decided I want to know how Lady Godiva felt. I've often wondered the same thing, he joked. Toby pulled on the reins, bringing Thunder to a halt. But really, Caroline, there's only so much I can take. His lips moved to the column of her throat. Toby? Hmm, he asked as he tasted the pulse point just below her ear. Have you ever done it on a horse? Done what? He asked, raising his head just long enough to ask the question. It, Toby, you know, it. He chuckled. Oh, it. No, Princess, never on a horse. Do you think it's possible? He grinned. Well, I don't know. He thought for a moment. He was not a strong man, and he was going to fail this test. Let's just get you turned around here. New scene. It was some time later that Thunder walked slowly toward the house. You are going to be the death of me, Toby muttered into Caroline's ear. Are you complaining? She asked with a giggle. No man in their right mind would. The guys would love to hear about this. What? He laughed. I'm just kidding. Toby brought Thunder to a halt, dismounted, adjusted his clothing, and grabbed the blanket from the saddlebag. He took time to rub his hand over Thunder's side, soothing him and telling him what a good boy he was. He swung back up behind Caroline and wrapped the blanket around her, making sure she was covered. Les would be back at the house to take Thunder. We wouldn't want to embarrass him. Him? What about me? Oh, I think you've become too audacious to be embarrassed. He clicked his tongue, and they started across the meadow, looking innocent as two babes. Les was waiting, as promised, when they arrived back at the house. Caroline, I'd like you to meet Les Carter. He's a real charmer when it comes to the horses. With a warm smile and mischief still in her eye, Caroline smiled and held her hand out to the crusty, tough-looking old man. Nice to meet you, ma'am, he said, discreetly turning from the blanket-wrapped young lady to Toby. You got the animals today, or do I? I've got 'em, Les, thanks. I have some phone calls to make, and then I'll be down. Down where? Caroline questioned as they entered the house. Down at the barn. The animals, remember? I told you I have a crowd of 'em. Les has been taking care of them for a while. I was out of town. But I need to go down and feed them and pet them and let them know I haven't forgotten them. Want to come? She grinned. Of course I do. Can I dress this time? I suppose. You have plenty of time because I have to make some business calls that will probably take at least an hour. Make yourself at home, and I'll come find you when it's time to go." He watched her, sighing and shaking his head as she started up the stairs. The little excursion had turned out to be nothing like he'd imagined. He wasn't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, what was done was done. He would have to be stronger from here on out. Toby had just pulled out his phone when it rang. "Hello?" "Hey, tomorrow?" "Sure." "Man, oh man, it's a real coincidence you called. You'll never guess who's here with me." "Caroline." "What do you mean, Caroline who? Caroline Jones?" "Yes, Caro." "It's a long story, but in a nutshell, I ran into her in New York. She was waiting tables." "Yeah, she's had a hard time." "I don't know, can't get her to talk about you. I mean, why she quit or what happened." "No, I think it's great that you're coming." "Well, it may be difficult for her, but heck, maybe it'll be good for her, you know? Clear the air." "I hope so too." "Why?" "Because I intend to marry her." "No, I'm not kidding." "Yeah, well, that's all over. I came to my senses." "Very funny, Uncle Jim. You always were a bucket of laughs." "Absolutely. We'll see you tomorrow." Hanging up the phone, he sat quietly pondering his options. Should he tell Caroline that the Stillwaters were coming to visit, or should he spring it on her? She'll probably be mad if he doesn't tell her, give her some warning. Yet, if he tells her, she may refuse to see them. Of course, he wants what's best for her, but who is he to assume to know what's best? What should he do? It's obvious she doesn't want to talk about what happened between herself and the Stillwaters, but as luck would have it, they were on their way to a family vacation and decided to stop by. He hadn't seen them in over a year. He sighed. Maybe it's fate. Maybe she's meant to see them tomorrow. That's it. I'll go with that. Anyway, he thought. Whatever happens, they'll help Caroline through it. Yep, he'd go with that, and that would be his excuse when she went off on him, and he was sure that she would do just that. The house seemed too quiet and empty by the time Toby finished his business, and he opened the door of the study to find a note taped to it. "I went down to the stables to find Les and talk to Molly. Love, me." Smiling, he hurried down to find her, only Toby didn't like what he found when he arrived. Caroline was sitting on Molly too, outside the stable, a young man standing next to her, his hand on her thigh. The guy looked familiar, but Toby couldn't place him. Caroline looked up at Toby as he approached, and she smiled and lifted her hand to wave, but quickly grasped the saddle horn again. The man rubbed his hand over her thigh as if calming her, apparently not realizing that he was agitating the man who approached. Or maybe he did. Les emerged from the stable as Toby reached Caroline. "Look at me, Toby," Caroline squealed. "I'm sitting on a horse all by myself." He smiled up at her briefly, but turned his attention to the dude who was offering his hand. Les spoke first, though. "Toby, you remember Brett?" "Can't say that I do." "Brett Chastain. He's been helping out here and there, said he needed something to occupy his time. And Lord knows there's always plenty to do here." The young man was smiling. Toby, however, was not, because he remembered where he'd seen him. "Brett Chastain?" "Yeah, that's right," Brett stated. "Tracy's cousin. You remember Tracy, don't you?" The sarcasm was not lost on Toby, and Caroline was confused by the scowl on Toby's face and further by his words. "What are you trying to pull? You know as well as I you don't need or want to work here, or anywhere, for that matter." Brett shrugged. "Just killing time. Besides, someone's got to work while you're off playing at the swimming hole." Toby grabbed him by the front of the shirt and pushed him backward, slammed him up against a wall inside the open barn doors. He kept his voice low as he asked the question. "Was that you I heard down there this morning?" Brett's face was pale, and fear shone in his eyes, giving Toby all the answer he needed. Brett watched Toby's face. Truth was, he'd had quite a time checking out Toby with his girlfriend. However, the truth would earn him a few scars for sure. "No, man, I swear. I only knew where you were, that's it." Toby released him, but didn't buy the story at all. He was sure it had been Brett he'd heard during the morning's escapade. Now, the question was, what was he up to? Brett was Harrison Chastain's gopher. Whatever he was up to, Toby would put an end to it right now. "Get off my land." Brett straightened his shirt and stood tall. No problem, but you won't get away free as a bird, Tobias, for what you did to Tracy. There's going to be hell to pay. I didn't do anything to Tracy except rescue her from what would have been a horrible mistake. A mistake has indeed been made, Smith, and you're going to pay. You threaten me? Toby advanced, but Brett hurried off before he could be further humiliated. Sorry, Toby, I didn't know there was bad blood between the two of you. Well, you couldn't have known less. It's okay. I didn't recognize him at first. That's Tracy's cousin. He works for her father. I met him once, the night I first met Tracy, and from what she said about him, he's a lazy good-for-nothing punk who does her father's bidding. Tracy and I recently called it quits, and apparently her father is out for blood. Then again, it might be her, because she was pretty mad when we broke up. Well, I was wondering why you had this little girl here with you while you were engaged to someone else. You should know me better than that. Les grinned. I thought I did, but who am I to judge? You're part of the family, Les. You catch me doing something I shouldn't be doing, you set me straight. I've got no problems with that. Toby turned when Molly snorted, and he went back out to Caroline and helped her down off the horse. What was that all about? She asked. I promised to tell you all about it, but right now we got to see some old friends. He took Caroline by the hand and walked her slowly toward the old barn where his animals were waiting for him. So, she prodded, are you going to tell me why you were so rude to Brett? He sighed. He's the nephew of a prominent Nashville family. His family and mine, well, let's just say we don't have the same priorities. He has no need to work and no reason to be on my land except to cause trouble. Well, why did Les allow him to work here then? Toby pressed his lips together. He needed to tell her about Tracy, and he would, but he didn't want her to face too much at once. The Stillwaters were coming tomorrow. He needed to help her handle that first. Our families had reached a truce of sorts, but had started to come together, but recently there was a falling out, and Les didn't know about it. I see, Caroline said, smiling up at him. You sure are scary when you get mad. His lips quirked in a half smile. He'd wanted to mutilate the man. He was pretty sure Caroline would want the same thing if she knew how her privacy had been violated. For now, though, he didn't think it wise to tell her that Brett had been witness to their early morning activities. At that moment, a giant golden retriever came lumbering down the path, barking madly, tail wagging. Toby stepped in front of Caroline before Rascal could knock her down and lick her to death. The dog literally jumped into his arms. There now, big fella. I'm glad to see you too, Toby soothed, scratching him behind his ears. The dog immediately rolled on the ground, belly up, and lay still, waiting for the usual. Toby laughed as he scratched him all over. You wouldn't think he was spoiled now, would you? Caroline knelt to help scratch him and giggled. You are a wimp for such a big boy. That's not very nice, Toby whined. Caroline laughed. I was talking to the dog. Rascal jumped up and ran off toward their destination, apparently to let the others know that their master was on his way. Caroline couldn't believe what she saw as they approached. 2 large cats, a bunch of kittens, 3 more dogs, a goat, a raccoon, 2 pigs, and a 3-legged deer turned their attention to Toby as he approached. Caroline clapped her hands in glee as she went from one animal to another, learning their names and petting and tickling and scratching and feeding. Toby told her the story behind each one. The large gray cat had been pregnant when she was found on the front porch just a few months ago. Soon thereafter, the black cat started hanging around, and when the kittens were born, well, what do you know? They were black. Rascal had been found in the rear of a restaurant where Toby's limo had parked during a personal appearance a few years before. He'd been just a puppy at the time and starving to death. Well, not anymore. The raccoon simply appeared one day and never left. Toby supposed he knew a good deal when he saw one. The pigs belonged to Molly, the human, not the horse. She rescued them from a fair. They were just too darn cute to be eaten. Toby answered the scratching sound at the kitchen door one day to find Rascal sitting politely, waiting to introduce his new little friend, a tiny black terrier mix. They had no idea where he came from and never did find the owners. The 2 other dogs were brothers, beagles, old hunting dogs put out to pasture. The deer, even though fully grown, was very small. It had been found in an illegal trap. Everyone had told Toby to put it out of its misery, but those big brown eyes were too full of fear, and he needed to see them calm and happy again. Doc Richards had been called in to perform a miracle, and once the animal's leg was amputated, Doc turned the deer's care over to Toby, who meticulously followed all the doc's advice and nursed the animal back to health. That had been over a year ago, and the deer was now happy, healthy, and content. It warmed Toby's heart to see her, nosing around the kittens and playing with the pigs. "What'd you name her?" Caroline asked. Toby shrugged unashamedly. "Bambi, of course. I mean, what else are you going to name a pet deer?" "I suppose you're right," Caroline laughed. They spent the afternoon feeding and playing with the animals, and Toby smiled down at Caroline as she stroked Rascal one last time before they started back up to the house. "How would you like to get all dressed up and go out? I'll show you some of the clubs in Nashville that actually let me sing before anyone knew who Toby Nash was." New scene. They ate first at an old country restaurant that had been around since Toby was a kid, and then started hitting the clubs. They made it to the third one before Caroline started yawning. Toby leaned down to whisper in her ear on the dance floor where they swayed slowly. "I'm sorry. I forgot you're used to going to bed early and waking up at the crack of dawn." She smiled up at him. "I suppose I'm just a little country girl at heart after all." Now that is music to my ears. Making a snap decision, he tugged on her hand. "There's something I want you to see." They left the club, and a few minutes later Toby pulled his Ford Explorer up in front of a 3-story large brick building. It was an older building with beautifully carved trim, and instead of gargoyles it was guarded by cupids at the top of the concrete steps, at each corner of the roof, and near the entrance. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's a neat old building." "Why?" "I'm thinking about buying it. I think it would be a great place. Put a recording studio on the top floor, maybe lease the next 2 floors to a business of some kind." "Do you like it?" "Sure," she agreed. "It could be really nice with some fixing up." "I'm glad you like it." He smiled. He would wait until later this week, after he asked her to marry him, to tell her about turning the building into a dance school run by Madame Caroline Smith. Caroline woke the next morning, feeling warm and cozy and pampered and mostly content. She was in the small bedroom, but didn't really remember how she'd gotten there. The day before had started with an abduction, gone into a wild first experience, and it was on a horse, and then there was playtime with a bunch of sweet animals, and finally dinner and dancing with the man she loved. What's more, that man was also the boy she'd fantasized about most of her life. Could she be any happier right now? It was like a dream from which she had no wish to awake. She pulled the covers over her head and closed her eyes and relished the wonderful feeling of love, security, and safety, only partially aware of the slight pain that intruded into her world. She'd reveled in Toby's touch yesterday, almost couldn't remember what it had been like before he taught her how it felt to be loved. "Rascal's not the only one getting spoiled around here," Toby said from the door. Caroline threw the covers off and grinned up at him. "Good morning." "Morning, Princess." "It's your fault, you know. You spoil me like a princess." "I love spoiling you," he said softly as he came forward to give her a quick kiss. "I came to wake you for breakfast. Are you hungry?" "I think I am. Yesterday was so amazing. I think I've worked up an appetite." Toby's lips pressed tightly together. "We didn't really talk about what happened yesterday. You were sleeping so soundly by the time we got home last night. I just carried you up here to bed." "Sorry about that." "About what?" "About falling asleep on you." "No problem, Princess. It was a long day. Shall we talk about our escapade on Thunder?" She smiled. "I don't see a need to talk about it. It was amazing. It was wonderful, and I want to do it again." Toby frowned. "What?" Caroline asked. "It wasn't good for you?" Toby chuckled and shook his head. "You, you have a lot to learn about men." "No, it's not that. It's just that I wasn't expecting for our relationship to go down that road just yet. But I guess you were my Bathsheba, and I lost all thought." "Bathsheba?" "It's a story in the Bible." "I'll be sure to look it up." Toby nodded. "So what are you saying? Are you feeling guilty?" He sighed heavily. "I think I am. Just 2 days ago I was talking about doing some soul searching. The very next day I break one of God's biggest moral laws." "Which is?" "I can't remember the exact scriptures, but there's a bunch of them. But nutshell version, Sex outside of marriage is frowned upon by God. Oh, well, that is disappointing, Toby chuckled. I didn't mean to take advantage of you, but I mean, it's not like I'm some paragon of virtue. Meaning you've had other women? He sighed. Well, sure. So why are you all worried about it now? Because, he stopped to think. Because, like I said, I haven't been acting like a real Christian man ought to act, and what makes me want to do that is you. You make me want to be a better man and to live up to what I know a good man is, like my father. I decide that one day, and the very next day I'm doing what ought not be done. He shook his head. Well, I'm not upset about it at all, Caroline confessed. He took her hand. I want you to know that I respect you regardless of my action, and that you're not just any girl to me. She nodded. Thanks, Toby. I believe you, but I think you're being way too serious. He only sighed. Okie dokie then. Let's go get some breakfast. New scene. Later, she turned to him as they cleaned the breakfast dishes. So what's the plan for today? Actually, I have a surprise for you. Really? Yes, he said, wringing his hands nervously. He was worried about what was soon to take place and having second thoughts. Something had happened between Caroline and the Stillwaters, something she had no wish to talk about, and what didn't make sense was the Stillwaters themselves didn't know what it was. Maybe he should have told them this wasn't a good time. Maybe he should have asked Caroline if she would like to see them. He hadn't asked, though, because he knew what she would say. Well, what's done is done. It's too late now to turn back. They would be here soon. So, Caroline asked, what's the surprise? It's not ready yet. We need to go feed the animals, and when we get back, it may be ready. She was puzzled, but went along with him. They fed and played with the animals. Toby watched her with them. She was calm and loving. She had such a good heart. He loved everything about her. I smell like a dog, Caroline complained when they returned from the barn. Well, why don't you go pamper yourself with a bubble bath, Toby began, and I'll check on the surprise. Okay, she giggled. I love it when you act so mysterious, she said as she ran up the stairs. Yeah, she may not love this, he thought as he pulled out his phone and called the Stillwater cell phone number. Where are you? He asked anxiously. We're at the exit. Be there in about 30 minutes. Everything okay? I don't know. I'm having second thoughts. She seems so vulnerable. I haven't told her you were coming. I was going to surprise her, but maybe I'm going about this all wrong. Then again, if I tell her, she'll probably refuse to see you. He paused. You have no idea what happened? No idea why she ran out on you that day? None whatsoever, Jim Stillwater stated. Look, Toby, I'm thinking it'll be good to clear the air after so long. Besides, it's out of our hands now. Sylvia is so frantic she would walk through fire right now to make sure this meeting happens. Don't worry, Toby. I have a feeling it'll all turn out. Well, I hope you're right, Toby said apprehensively. Caroline was still upstairs when the Stillwaters pulled up in front of the house. Toby hugged the woman he always known as Aunt Sylvia, even though they weren't really related. And next he shook hands with Uncle Jim, also just an honorary title, and then he turned to Paul. So how's it feel to be all graduated from high school, Paul? He asked as he shook the young man's hand. Paul grinned. It's heaven, Toby. Freedom, man. Toby turned his attentions to the adorable girl at Paul's side. Lynn? This just cannot be little Anelli. How old are you now? 13? 14? She placed her hands on her hips. Funny, Toby. You know I'm only a year younger than Paul. Toby hugged her. I swear, Lynn, you get more beautiful every time I see you. Lynn blushed. Sylvia was wringing her hands nervously. Why don't you kids go out back and make yourselves scarce for a while? Lynn frowned at her mother. Well, if she used to take care of us, won't she want to see us too? Yes, Toby affirmed, but not at first. She's been through some hard times, and I don't want her to be overwhelmed. Lynn nodded with a smile. Come on, Paul. You can push me on the swings for old time's sake before you go off to college and I get your room. When pigs fly, Paul jeered as they walked around the back of the house. Caroline stood at the glass door to the balcony in Toby's room. They had visitors. The two young people out on the swing were a handsome couple. The young man had light brown hair, trimmed very neatly, and a lean but muscular build. The girl also had brown hair, maybe a shade lighter than the boy's. It was very long and very curly. What a lovely girl, Caroline thought, as she turned away. Wondering who'd come to visit, she hurried down to find Toby. He met her at the bottom of the stairs, his expression somber. Is something wrong? Caroline asked immediately. Toby pressed his lips together and reached his hand out to her. No, nothing's wrong. Someone has come to visit. Yes, I saw some kids out back. Who are they? You'll see. They're in the kitchen. He took her hand and ushered her into the kitchen where the Stillwaters awaited, thinking it would be less formal there. They could all sit around the table and chat. Caroline came through the swinging door and looked up to see a man and woman. She smiled pleasantly at them. Hello, Caro, Sylvia said softly. It took a moment for her to realize who spoke, and when it hit her, Caroline's smile faded completely. Her heart rate jumped into high, her hand shook as she reached for the countertop to steady herself. Mr. Stillwater stood behind his wife, smiling kindly. Caroline didn't speak as she tried to comprehend the situation. It's good to see you again, Caroline, Jim said. Caroline looked up at Toby, her eyes brimming with tears. Her hands visibly shook as she reached up to smooth an imaginary hair from her face. He was pretty sure he knew what she was thinking. Traitor. You knew I didn't even want to talk about them, and now you've brought them here. He was wrong. Caroline's thoughts weren't pinning blame on Toby. The Stillwaters are actually here, she thought. The people she betrayed so long ago. The only people in the world who had trusted her, and she had betrayed that trust. And they finally had her cornered, and they're going to know what had driven her away, and the truth is going to come out because she has nowhere to go and nowhere to hide. And what are they going to think of her? Oh, God. What is Toby going to think? He'll be so ashamed of her. Toby, with his soft heart, who saves deer and dogs, is going to be absolutely disgusted with her. And the kids out back. That must be Paul and Lynn. Caroline opened her mouth to speak, but there was such a buzzing in her head she could barely force the words out. How did... She never finished her sentence. Toby caught her before she hit the floor. Oh, honey, I'm sorry, he muttered, as he scooped her up and carried her to the front room to lay her on the sofa. Jim laid a calming hand on his wife's shoulder as she went about wetting a cloth. He turned her to him and wiped a tear away. It'll be okay. Sylvia shook her head. I feel like I've found a lost daughter. We should have tried harder to find her back then. She's so beautiful and so sad. Well, maybe we can help her now, her husband comforted. All is not lost. Sylvia smiled, wiped away her tears, and headed out. Caroline's face was deathly pale, and Sylvia placed the cloth on Caroline's head and turned to the men. Out. They didn't question her. They were all too willing to let Sylvia handle it. When Caroline opened her eyes, the woman she had so admired was smiling at her that sweet way she had smiled at her own children so often. Her hand stroked Caroline's. I don't know, Caro, what is going through that head of yours, Sylvia began. I never did, but I intend to find out. She sighed at the look of misery on Caroline's face. Oh, Caroline, we have missed you so much. I've wondered about you and worried about you. And when Jim told me that day that you'd quit, I was so upset. I marched myself right over to your apartment, but I couldn't get anyone to answer the door. Caroline, you were like a daughter to me. I knew there were some problems, and I was hoping that one day I would get you to open up and confide in me, but I never got the chance. I've lived with so much guilt letting you slip away like you did. Caroline didn't even try to hold back the tears. You don't know, Mrs. Stillwater. You would never want me as a daughter. You're right, Caroline. I don't know. I have no idea what made you separate yourself from us, but whatever it was, we could have talked it out and worked through it. When you care about someone, Caroline, you don't let little things get in the way. It wasn't little, she blubbered. If it had been little, I would have never left. Sylvia stroked her cheek. I don't understand, sweetie. Please help me to understand. I can't, Caroline sobbed. I just can't. It hurts me, Carol, that you don't trust me enough to know that I would understand. I'm sorry. I don't mean to hurt you. She cried harder. I never meant to hurt anyone. Well, then tell me, hon, what happened? Was it something we did? Did we get too personally involved? I know I was always trying to get you to eat, and I was always asking you about your grades. It's just because I cared so much. No, it didn't have anything to do with you. Y'all were always so nice to me. Then what was it, dear? What happened? I, I can't tell you. Don't you see? It's just too bad. No matter what happened to you, Carol, it would never change the way we feel about you. Not me. It didn't happen to me. Then who? Tell me, Carol. Tell me what you think is so bad. Caroline shook her head. I did something. Something terrible. I didn't mean to. It just happened. And I can't talk about it. Oh, hon. Whatever you did, I'm sure we can find a solution. Now, you've made a good start. Tell me, what did you do? Whatever it is, we can work through it. I'm sure of it. I can't. She tried to rise and needed to escape, but only got as far as a sitting position as Mrs. Stillwater held her arm fast. She spoke to Caroline firmly now, like a mother would discipline a child. Caroline Jones, you sit right here and tell me what you did that you think is so bad. Whatever it is, if it's been bothering you all these years, you must realize it will never stop hurting you until you own up to it. It's the only way to overcome it, and you can't keep running away. Caroline looked down, considering Sylvia's words. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should have confessed a long time ago. What a coward I am. The very least I could do is take my medicine. She would lose their trust. Worse, she would lose Toby's love, but she didn't want to live any longer with the dark cloud hanging over her, constantly reminding her of what she was. No more. Taking a few deep breaths, she braced for the worst. As tears dripped down onto her hands, where they were holding Mrs. Stillwater's hand, she said it quickly. I hit him. She'd spoken so softly that Sylvia could barely make out what Caroline said. Did you say you hit him? Who, honey? Who did you hit? Caroline pulled away, stood, paced away, and swung back. I hit him, she cried. Do you hear? I hit Paul. How do you like me now? I got angry and I slapped your baby, just like my mother, just like her. She threw her hands to her face. I can't stand the thought. I hate myself for it. You see now? I had to leave. It was the only way to make sure I never hurt anyone again. In the kitchen, Toby leaned his head back against the kitchen door where he and Jim stood. What have I done? I shouldn't have brought this on her. I should have talked to her first. She's going to have a freaking nervous breakdown. You're wrong. What's happening in there is a good thing. If she's been harboring feelings of self-hatred all these years, she must be miserable. And now she'll be able to work things out, and she'll feel 1,000 times lighter. I hope you're right, Toby whispered. Sylvia Stillwater gazed at the beautiful young woman who'd had already punished herself more than she'd ever deserved. Caroline had just finished telling her the entire circumstances surrounding what had happened all those years ago, and Sylvia felt sick to think what Carol had been through, and she hadn't been there for her. Hadn't seen it, hadn't stopped it. The poor child had been suffering in anguish right under her nose. How self-centered she must have been to not have seen what was happening. She shook her head. Somehow, she had to make things right. First things first, she needed to help Carol see that no damage had been done. Come sit down, Carol. Caroline slumped back down on the sofa, looking defeated. Sylvia took her hand. Well, first of all, let me assure you, Carol, that you smacking Paul was not the first time he'd ever been punished, and definitely not the last. Paul was a trying child, to say the least. No, that's not true. Paul was an angel, Caroline argued. Well, you're only saying that to try to make me feel better when what you should be doing is telling me you never want to see me again. Oh, honey, please listen to me. Paul was a terror. Ask Jim. It doesn't matter. He didn't deserve what he got from me. Sylvia laughed softly, hoping to make light of Carol's concerns. Oh, I'm sure he did. How can you say that? He was your baby. I'm sure you never hit him in the face. No, I didn't. That was a mistake, and I forgive you for that, Carol. Still, one little mistake is not worth suffering over for a lifetime. If you had stayed, we could have talked all these things out. No, I couldn't have stayed. I've read about abused children, and they grow up to be abusers. There is no escaping what my mother has made me into. I'm a monster. You are nothing of the sort, Sylvia comforted. I didn't know, Carol. I'm so sorry I didn't figure it out. Just realizing what you were going through back then, I'm the one who should feel guilty. I do feel guilty. I didn't know, Caroline. I knew you and your mom weren't very close, and I knew you struggled financially. How could I have been so blind as to not see what you were going through? Caroline used the cloth from her head to wipe her face. I don't want you to feel bad about anything, she said, shaking her head. I was really good at keeping it hidden. A real pro. I was so ashamed that my own mother couldn't love me, and I didn't want anyone to know, especially not you and Mr. Stillwater. You were the only security I had." Sylvia hugged her hard. Bless your heart, to have to go through that all alone. Not all alone. Toby knew. He did? He guessed right away. I should wear him out. Caroline smiled through her tears at the thought. I made him swear he could never tell anyone. Sylvia nodded. You trusted him, and he was worthy of that trust. I suppose that's a good thing. She smiled, then focused back on Caroline's problem, which, in a nutshell, was self-hatred. You said a moment ago that Jim and I were your only security. Do you realize what strength it took for you to remove yourself from the only security you knew to make sure the children were safe? Caroline shook her head. I don't see that as strength. Fear, maybe. Fear of getting caught. Mr. Stillwater chose that time to enter the room, and he approached the sofa and knelt down beside it, and Caroline cast her eyes downward, feeling ashamed. I heard, Caro. I want you to know I agree with my wife, and I think you didn't finish reading about abused children, because it's the knowledge that will keep you from becoming what your mother was. Only when we don't know what is happening around us are we victims to circumstance. Knowledge is power, and your knowing and understanding what your mother did will help you to be a better parent, not a worse one. When she didn't respond, Jim took her hand. Do you understand what I'm saying, Caro? You're saying there's hope for me, she said softly. Yes, Caro, if you can only forgive yourself. You've done nothing that warrants a lifetime of punishment. Oh, Caroline, Sylvia cried, you have to see what a wonderful person you are. So loving and so kind and so conscientious. Toby told us all about what you've accomplished and about the kind of person you've become and the things you've done and all that against great odds. Toby, Caroline mumbled. I don't want him to know what I did. I can't bear for him to know. I'm so ashamed. I'm afraid he already knows, Jim said. He was in the kitchen with me and heard everything. He's worried about you and worried that he overstepped his bounds arranging this surprise meeting with you. He loves you a great deal. They raised their heads at the sound of the kitchen door swinging shut, and Toby stood by the door. The look on his face told of the love he felt. Forgive me, he pleaded. There's nothing to forgive, she shook her head. I didn't want you to know about this. You see? Now you know. How can you? She stopped as Toby approached. What? How can I love you? How could I not? You're the strongest, most loving person I know. The sacrifice you made because you thought the children were at risk is incredible. What you did was not such a bad thing, at least I hope not, because I've been a lot more violent than that, and I don't have any abusive parents to blame it on. Don't make light of this, Toby. You didn't hurt a child that you love. He laughed. Well, I'm sure Ben would disagree with that. Paul has no recollection of what happened, Caroline, Sylvia said. I'm sure of it. He never said anything to us about it, probably because he knew he was in the wrong. There was no damage done, except to yourself. You really think so? Yes, I really do. So please, sweetie, come back into our family. Be the elder sister the kids always heard about. They know about me? They remember me? They remember. We had a few pictures, and whenever they looked through the picture albums, they'd ask about you. They're out back, waiting to see you. Caroline looked panicked, and Toby pulled her up. Why don't you go upstairs and freshen up? Everything's going to be all right. You'll see. She smiled at him. You always say that, and it always seems to be true. Mrs. Stillwater took her hand. Come on, Caro. We ladies will go together. By the time Caroline came back downstairs, she was calmer and much more at peace with herself. Only the tears came again as she met and spoke with Paul and Lynn. Y'all are so grown, Caroline cried. I miss so much stuff, like your first day at school and your first girlfriend or boyfriend. Well, believe me, Lynn quipped, you didn't miss much where Paul was concerned. Funny, sis, at least I had a first. Oh, are you talking about the one with the mustache or the one that was pleasantly plump? Caroline listened to them banter back and forth, and she put a shaky hand to her mouth. So much time has passed. She ran back up to the bathroom. Lynn sighed. Sorry, Mom, I was just trying to make her laugh. It's okay, Lynelli. I think she's just sad that you grew up so quickly. I'm pretty sad about that myself. New scene. Once Caroline had control of her emotions, the rest of the day was beautiful, like the calm after a storm. They played in the pool and gave Caroline a riding lesson and filled her in on Lynn and Paul's lives. The men grilled out by the pool while Sylvia and Caroline fixed potato salad and beans in the kitchen. Toby watched her as she carried a tray of utensils to set out. Her face was glowing. She was finally at peace, and that gave him enormous pleasure. After an early supper, all 6 people worked side by side in the kitchen, putting it to rights, and then adjourned to the usual place, Toby at the piano. This time, however, Lynn sat next to him, and they surprised Caroline by singing a duet for her. Carol thrilled at Lynn's beautiful voice. After several songs, Sylvia turned her attention to Caroline. "Will you dance for me, Carol, please?" "I'd love to, but I didn't bring any music," she said with a shrug. The piano changed suddenly to Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Toby grinned. "I bet I can play anything you want. There are dozens of books filled with sheet music on that shelf over there, both classical and show tunes, and if you don't like any of those, I can download any piece of music online in a few seconds, so no excuses. What do you want?" She went to the shelf and thumbed through, finally settling on Odette's variation from the Dance of the Swan in Swan Lake. She handed it to Toby. "Can you play this?" she challenged. He looked at it, set it on the piano. "Give me a minute to practice." "You practice. I'll go change. I can't dance in these jeans." She came down a few minutes later in some shorts and a knit top, her feet bare. "Y'all are just going to have to pretend that you see a pretty white tutu." The men quickly cleared the floor of tables and chairs and rugs, and Caroline could clearly see herself in the glass in front of her, and it made her feel right at home, as if she were in class. Toby began to play and Caroline to dance, and the Stillwater family was highly impressed. She may be a self-described unemployed dancer, but in their eyes she was a prima ballerina. They marveled at her grace and her skill and her beauty. She was breathtaking. "I am so proud of you," Jim said as she finished. "You've accomplished so much and against such great odds." Toby smiled as they heaped her with praise. He'd wanted to see the healing. He'd wanted to see the 3-legged deer find happiness. It seemed to be coming true. The evening was quickly coming to an end. The Stillwaters had to catch a late evening flight out of Nashville, headed to Arizona for a family camping nature excursion. Within only a few minutes of her performance, they were hugging and kissing each other goodbye, promising that this time they would stay in touch. When they were alone again, Caroline and Toby pushed the furniture back in place, and Toby took her by the hand. "Have I told you how beautiful you are?" "Well, you make me feel as if I really am," she sighed. "May I tell you how impressed I am that you can play the piano so well?" He grinned. "Thanks. Music, it really is my bliss." "I can tell. We make a good couple." "Yeah, we do," he agreed, his heart soaring. While he went to lock up and turn out the lights, Caroline was surprised to feel the pain again, a slight pain in her lower abdomen. She felt it when she danced and thought it was because she hadn't properly stretched out. She rubbed her hand over the area as she waited for Toby to return to her side. She'd been participating in activities she definitely wasn't used to. She was probably going to have some new aches and pains. She hoped it was nothing serious because she had no medical insurance and couldn't afford to be sick. Besides, no way was she going to let a little pain ruin the vacation of a lifetime. She'd sooner cut off her legs. That night, Toby escorted Caroline to her room. He could tell she was disappointed, though she didn't say anything. He kissed her good night. He held her for a long time. He made sure she felt how much he loved her. Then he went to his own room and his own bed. He'd wanted to make love to her, badly. Even more, though, he wanted her to know that what he felt wasn't just about the carnal side of things. He wanted her to know he valued her as a person, that she was important. He also wanted God to know that he was trying to be a better man. Apprehensive about the question he planned on asking her in the morning, he was having a hard time falling asleep. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning when he heard the soft knock on his door. "Come in," he said as he sat up. Caroline peeked in. "Hey." "Hey, darling. Something wrong?" "I had a bad dream." "How bad?" "Bad enough to wake me up and have me not wanting to close my eyes again." He patted the bed beside him. She came quickly and scooted in next to him. He put his arm around her and pulled her close against his side. "You want to tell me about it?" "Well, I would if I could remember it. I only know I woke up with a start." Maybe it was something brought up from the recesses of your mind by seeing the still waters." "Maybe." She laid her head on his chest. "Whatever it was, I feel all better now that I'm with you." He kissed the top of her head. "Sleep now," he whispered. "I've got you." She did, and as he lay there holding her, he thought of all the conversations they'd had on this little trip to the farm. They discussed religion and politics and world events and music and art, dance, TV, and movies. He found she was a treasure trove of contradictions, and even though he didn't think it was possible, he'd grown to love her more. Early in the morning, when the sun rises and the birds sing, the time when Caroline is in her element, he would ask her to share her life with him. And that is the end of chapter 7.